let's pull back the curtain on a really fundamental but often overlooked part of JavaScript. You could almost call it a secret toolbox, one you use every single day, whether you realize it or not. Okay, so think about this for a second. You open up a brand new script, right? You type alert hello, and bam, a pop-up appears. But how? Where in the world did that alert function come from? You know you didn't write it. You definitely didn't import it from anywhere. It's just there. Well, that's the exact mystery we're going to crack today. And the answer to that mystery, it's something called the global object. This is the hidden source of all these built-in powers that just seem to appear out of thin air. So what is this thing really? Well, to put it simply, the global object is a special object that exists in every single JavaScript environment. It comes preloaded with a bunch of useful variables and functions that are available to you anywhere at any time without you having to lift a finger. I love this analogy. Think of the global object as this universal toolbox that's just always there, no matter what project you're working on. It's full of standard tools, functions like alert, built-ins like array. You don't have to bring your own. You just reach in and grab what you need. Now, here's where things can get just a little bit confusing. This universal toolbox doesn't always go by the same name. It actually changes depending on where your code is running. So depending on your JavaScript environment, the global object has a few different aliases. In a web browser, which is probably where most of us spend our time, it's called window. But if you jump over to a server environment with Node.js, suddenly it's called global. Kind of confusing, right? Well, to fix this mess, a universal name was finally introduced, global this. And the best part? It just works everywhere. So the big takeaway here is pretty simple. While you're going to see window all over the place in older browser-based code, using global this is really the modern best practice. It just makes your code more robust and portable so it can run in any environment, now and in the future. All right, now that we know what the global object is, we need to talk about a very, very common pitfall. This is something that trips up developers all the time. I'm talking about the global variable trap. Okay, so here's the trap. When you're in the main part of your script, what we call the global scope, and you declare a variable with the old school var keyword, that variable gets attached as a property directly onto the global object. And this, my friends, can lead to some really nasty, hard to find bugs. And here's that problem live in action. Look at the left side. When we use var to declare gvar, it gets slapped right onto the window object. We can literally access it with window.gvar. This is what we mean by polluting the global object. Imagine you create a variable named data, and then you pull in a third-party library that also creates a global variable named data. Poof, one can override the other, causing total chaos. But now look at the right side. When we use the modern, much safer let keyword, glet does not become a property of window. It stays nice and cleanly scoped to our script, avoiding any of those messy conflicts. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The documentation is crystal clear on this. This quirky behavior with var only exists for backward compatibility with really old code. For any modern JavaScript you're writing, you should absolutely, positively not rely on this. It just leads to messy, unpredictable code. So, if we're not supposed to be polluting the global object, are there any good reasons to interact with it? Oh, absolutely. Let's take a look at how the pros use it correctly. One of the most important and totally legitimate uses of a global object is to check if an environment, like say an older web browser, supports a modern feature. And if it doesn't, we can add it ourselves. This awesome technique is called creating a polyfill. The logic here is actually brilliantly simple. Step 1. You check the global object to see if a feature exists. You're basically asking, hey window, do you have a promise object? Step 2. If the answer is no, you create it yourself and attach it to the global object. This is how you can make sure your modern code can run even in older environments that don't have all the latest bells and whistles. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground pretty quickly, so let's just take a moment to boil it all down to the key takeaways. So, to recap, the global object is your universal toolbox. For future-proofed code, you should really use global this to access it. The number one trap to avoid is using var at the top level of your scripts. Always use let or const instead. The professional way to interact with the global object is for cool things like polyfills, which let you support older environments. And finally, the golden rule. For cleaner, more maintainable code, keep your global variables to an absolute minimum. And that brings us to our final thought. Now that you understand how this global toolbox works, and just how easy it is to accidentally throw extra stuff in there with var, it's worth asking yourself, what might be cluttering up the global scope in your own projects? it might just be time for a little spring cleaning.